So let's go ahead and move on to our running back. Steph, I'm going to let you kick off the running back starts of the week. Here in week 2, who do you got?
So for our starts of the week, right, these aren't super deep names. These aren't supposed to be extremely chalk options, except for in a case where we think that a guy you're already starting is going to explode that much more. And for me, that's Raheem Mostert against the Jets in week 2. Mostert was only on the field for 60% of snaps, but put up 25 fantasy points. Had 4 receptions on 6 targets, led the week in receiving yards amongst running backs last week. And we saw what Devin Singletary and Zach Moss were able to do to that Jets defense. I think the sky's the limit for Raheem Mostert. You add in the fact that Kittle is now injured, probably going to be limited if he plays. Brandon Ayuk is out. Deebo Samuel's on IR. There's just not a lot of weapons for Jimmy G to throw to. And so we saw some of that air volume going towards Raheem Mostert. He didn't surpass 2 targets in a game all of last season, and now he's getting whatever it was, 5 or 6 targets there in week 1. I think that's only going to continue now with Kittle being limited right from the jump in what should be an extremely easy matchup for the 49ers. They have a great offensive line. I expect there to be some super big holes for Mostert to run through.
Yeah, they should lead in this game, which is a great game script for Mostert.
And it's a great game script. That's the other thing I was going to say. They should be leading, just running as much as possible. It's going to be the Trent Taylor and Kendrick Bourne show through the air for Jimmy G. So Jimmy G was my start of the week last week. I'm pivoting off of that and going with Raheem Mostert, who's going to be the other beneficiary when they're running so much. And Mostert still, he looks explosive. I know he's an older guy, undrafted free agent, jumped around to a bunch of different teams. He hit the highest top speed amongst all players in the NFL in week 1. So this man is explosive, and he's going to have the room to run. Plug in Mostert in week 2.
Steph, I love the pick. And, one concern people are going to have potentially is Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman wasn't very involved in week 1, only saw 6 snaps. There was a lot of the air quality issues. So the expectation would be going to New York, Tevin Coleman's not going to have to sit out because of some of those health issues. He has a at-risk condition. I believe he has sickle cell, so that's why Tevin Coleman was a little bit limited. So the expectation for me is that Tevin Coleman will actually be more involved. We know Jerick McKinnon was involved as well, but I love the pick, Steph, because there's limited passing options for the 49ers. They should get up in this game early, and even if Coleman gets more involvement, even if McKinnon gets more involvement, Mostert on his own could still see that 15 to 20 carries and a couple of targets as well. So I think, even with other guys in the backfield, Mostert should see a ton of volume in this game. And if you drafted him as your RB3, he had a really good performance last week, and you're wondering whether to pull him up into your lineup off of your bench, I think this is definitely a time to do so. So I love the call. So my running back start of the week, I'm not giving up on this guy yet. It's Ronald Jones. When they signed Leonard Fournette, everyone probably thought Alex and his Ronald Jones hype train has come to a crashing halt. It did not ever stop, Steph. And we look at Ronald Jones this week against the Carolina Panthers, and there's nothing not to like here. I was hyped to see Ronald Jones and his week 1 involvement, even in a tough matchup against the New Orleans Saints. He saw 47% of snaps, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when he was in the game, he was getting the ball. He had 17 carries for 66 yards. And in a tough matchup, that was a far better stat line than Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette had, I believe, 5 carries for 5 yards. Let me spot check. Yeah, 5 carries for 5 yards for Leonard Fournette. And as far as the eye test goes, Ronald Jones looked like the much, much better running back in this game. He also had 2 receptions for 16 yards on 3 targets, even was lined up in the slot a couple times, being utilized in that passing game. So I was really excited to see how much he was used and how much better he looked than Leonard Fournette in week 1. And you look at this matchup against Carolina, you can't ask for a better matchup for a running back. The Panthers just gave up 93 yards and 3 touchdowns to Josh Jacobs. Jacobs had 4 receptions for 46 yards in that game as well. And this Panthers defense, they weren't able to stop anybody on the ground last year. And early on this year, it looks like it's going to be the same story. So now coming into a great matchup, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are a little bit banged up. I think they could really rely on the ground in this game. They're going to rely on these running backs. And against Carolina, even if Fournette gets some more snaps in this game, Ronald Jones, if he gets 15 carries, should be a good bet to get close to 100 yards and fall into the end zone. So I'm all in on Ronald Jones this week against the Panthers, starting him in a couple of leagues this week. And fingers crossed, hoping Ronald Jones can continue to solidify his spot as the number 1 back on this team.
I think that's a great story. And this is the time where you're going to get that value out of Ronald Jones. If you drafted before the Leonard Fournette news, you probably took him in 6th, 7th, 8th round. We had him as a mid-round league winner prior to Fournette coming over. It looks like Fournette's still getting eased in. He didn't look great. It might be a situation where they are trying to build him up and learn this offense. But we saw Adrian Peterson come in 1 week before the season and dominate with the Lions. So I have some questions about Fournette. And until we see that breakout from Fournette on the Buccaneers, I think it's Rojo time, and in a great matchup, he should absolutely eat.